That sound isn't a jet on a runway. It's a car. A car you could have parked in your driveway in 1964. No pistons, no spark plugs, a turbine spinning at 36,000 revolutions a minute behind a hand-built Italian body the color of molten bronze. Chrysler called it the Turbine Car. 55 were built. 46 were later crushed. Just 9 are left on Earth. And the strangest part isn't that they destroyed it, it's that, for 2 years, it actually worked. In the hands of ordinary people who ran it on whatever they could pour into the tank. To understand why Chrysler crushed it, you have to understand how badly they wanted it. The dream was older than most of the engineers chasing it, a turbine instead of a piston engine. And the pitch was intoxicating. A turbine has roughly 80% fewer moving parts. It barely vibrates. It doesn't need a warm-up, it doesn't stall, and it almost never needs a tune-up. And it will burn nearly anything that catches fire. For 3 decades, Chrysler poured money and brilliance into it, generation after generation, chasing an engine that could rewrite the automobile. And by 1963, they finally had their answer. The A831, 130 horsepower, 425 pound-feet of torque, and a decision to stop testing it in a lab and hand it to the public. This is the part that sounds invented. Chrysler built 50 of these cars and loaned them out free to ordinary Americans. Not engineers, not executives. 203 regular drivers in 133 cities across 48 states. Each one keeping a jet-powered car for about 3 months. They commuted in it. They took it to church. And because the turbine didn't care what it drank, the demonstrations became legend. It ran on diesel, on kerosene, on jet fuel. In Mexico, for the president, they ran one on tequila. Someone, somewhere, ran one on perfume. People loved it. The smoothness, the whoosh, the sheer impossibility of it sitting in their garage. Chrysler had done the impossible. They had proven the turbine car in the real world, and that proof is exactly what makes what came next so hard to explain. Because underneath the romance, the numbers were brutal. The fuel economy was, in the words of the people who drove it, awful. A turbine sips at a steady cruise, but it drinks like a furnace in stop-and-go traffic. Step on it and there was lag. A beat of hesitation, while the turbine spooled up. At idle, the exhaust ran searingly hot. And then there was the body. It wasn't stamped out in Detroit. Each one was hand-formed by Ghia in Italy. Gorgeous, slow, and expensive. A beautiful car, built on a powertrain that was thirsty, hesitant, and costly to make. The experiment had a deadline. And when it ended, Chrysler didn't put the cars in a museum. They lined them up to be destroyed. When the user program closed, Chrysler took every car back and crushed 46 of them. Not because they failed, because of a tariff. Those exquisite bodies had been built in Italy, and bringing them into the country meant the cars carried a heavy import duty. A bill tied to their high handmade value. Paying that tax on cars Chrysler never intended to sell made no sense. So the cheaper answer was the Crusher. Researchers who dug into it, like the author Steve Leto, found the same cold logic. The cars weren't destroyed because the idea was bad. They were destroyed to avoid a tax. 9 were spared, handed to museums, and saved for history. The rest of the future went under the press. And yet, Chrysler couldn't let go. For more than a decade after the Crusher, the engineers kept going. Newer turbines, cleaner, more efficient, hunting the version that could finally go on sale. But the world was turning against them. In 1973, the oil crisis hit, and a thirsty engine became a liability overnight. Then came emissions law. The turbine burned hot enough to throw off nitrogen oxides it couldn't easily tame, and the standards kept tightening. In Chrysler's own later words, the technology simply didn't exist to build turbine engines anywhere near the price of an ordinary motor. Every year, the dream cost more and arrived no closer, and Chrysler was running out of road. By 1979, Chrysler wasn't fighting for the turbine. It was fighting to exist. Losses were mounting, sales were sliding, and the company went to Washington with its hand out. The Carter administration agreed to back it. A federal loan guarantee worth up to $1.5 billion, signed as the company stood at the very edge. But survival came with conditions. The turbine program. The 30-year obsession, the engine that had once run on tequila in a stranger's driveway. It was a luxury a near-bankrupt company could not justify, and the government had no interest in paying for it. So the dream that Chrysler had chased since before the war was quietly closed. As the price of staying alive, the company survived. The turbine did not. Today, 9 of them remain. One sits in the Smithsonian. One lives in Jay Leno's garage, still running, still sounding like nothing else on the road. They are the survivors of a future that was built, proven, driven by hundreds of ordinary people, and then crushed to save a few dollars in tax and abandoned to save a company. The Chrysler Turbine wasn't crushed because it didn't work. It was crushed because the world it needed, cheap, clean, and patient, with a strange new engine, never showed up in time. It's the most haunting kind of failure. Not the idea that was wrong, but the idea that was simply too early. Chrysler built the future. Then it helped bury it, and it kept 9 pieces, just so we'd never quite be able to forget.